The mop handle slipped from Jack Sullivan's calloused hands as he heard the elevator chime on the 57th floor. It was 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday, and absolutely no one should have been arriving at the executive level of Montgomery Industries at this hour. "Daddy," Penny's small voice whispered from behind the industrial cleaning cart where he'd created a makeshift fort using fresh towels and his jacket. Her wide hazel eyes, so much like her late mother's, peeked out with concern. Jack's heart hammered against his ribs as he quickly pushed the cart closer to the wall, trying to better conceal his 6-year-old daughter. "Shh, sweetheart, remember what I said? Stay very quiet and keep reading your book, okay?" The elevator door slid open with an expensive whisper, and out stepped Catherine Montgomery herself. Even at this ungodly hour, the 27-year-old CEO looked like she'd stepped from the pages of Fortune magazine. Her charcoal blazer impeccable, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun that emphasized her sharp cheekbones and winter blue eyes. Jack had been cleaning these offices for 3 years, but he'd only seen Ms. Montgomery a handful of times, always from a distance. The other maintenance workers called her the Iron Lady, brilliant, ruthless, and utterly devoted to the empire her late father had built. She'd taken over at 24 and tripled the company's value, but at what the gossip mill suggested was a terrible personal cost. "Mr." She glanced at his name tag, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Sullivan, I wasn't aware we'd changed the cleaning schedule." "No, ma'am, still the same schedule." Jack straightened, trying to position himself between her and the cart. "I'm just running a bit behind tonight." Her eyes sharp as Frost scanned the area. Jack noticed she carried a leather portfolio and her phone, its screen illuminating her face with an eerie glow. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. She probably hadn't slept in days. "Behind," she repeated, taking a step closer. Her heels clicked against the marble floor like a countdown. "And yet I distinctly heard you speaking to someone." Jack's mouth went dry. His job, their health insurance, their tiny apartment in Queens Penny's chance at staying in her school, it all flashed before his eyes. "I sometimes talk to myself while I work. Helps pass the time." Catherine's perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched. "Do you often refer to yourself as sweetheart?" Before Jack could respond, a small sneeze erupted from behind the cart. His heart stopped. Catherine's eyes immediately locked onto the sound source, and her expression shifted from suspicion to something unreadable. "Come out," she commanded, though her voice had lost some of its edge. Jack moved to protest, but Catherine raised a hand, silencing him. Slowly, Penny emerged from her hiding spot, clutching her worn copy of Charlotte's Web against her chest. Her light brown curls were mussed from her makeshift bed, and she wore pink pajamas decorated with tiny unicorns, a stark contrast to the corporate sterility surrounding them. "I'm sorry," Penny said in a voice barely above a whisper, her eyes filling with tears. "Daddy said I had to be invisible, but I couldn't help it. The cleaning stuff made my nose tickly." Catherine stood frozen, staring at the child with an expression Jack couldn't decode. For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the air conditioning and the distant wail of a siren somewhere in the city below. "How old are you?" Catherine asked finally, her voice strangely soft. 6 3/4, Penny replied, lifting her chin with a touch of pride despite her tears. "I'll be 7 in February." "And you're here because—" Jack stepped forward, placing a protective hand on Penny's shoulder. "My babysitter canceled last minute. My neighbor who usually helps is in the hospital, and I couldn't miss work. I need this job, Miss Montgomery. We need it." He waited for the axe to fall for her to pull out her phone and call security or HR or both. Instead, Catherine did something that shocked him to his core. She sat down right there on the marble floor, designer suit, and all cross-legged in front of Penny. "Charlotte's Web," she observed, nodding at the book. "That's quite advanced reading for someone who's 6 3/4. Penny's fear began to melt away, replaced by enthusiasm. "I've read it 3 times already. Mama used to read it to me before she went to heaven. And now I read it myself. Charlotte is very smart, like you probably are running this whole big building." "Penny," Jack warned gently, but Catherine held up a hand again. "What makes you think Charlotte is smart?" Catherine asked, and Jack could have sworn he saw the ghost of a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Well," Penny said, settling into what Jack recognized as her storytelling posture, "she saves Wilbur even though everyone thinks she's just a spider. She uses her web to write messages, which is kind of like coding. Daddy's teaching me about computers, and she's a good friend even when it's hard. Plus, she's a girl spider who's the hero, and that's important because sometimes people think only boy spiders can be heroes, which is silly. Catherine's expression cracked, revealing something raw and vulnerable underneath. You're learning coding. Jack cleared his throat. Just basics, educational games mostly. She picks things up quickly. Show me, Catherine said, suddenly standing and smoothing her skirt. She walked to her corner office, its glass walls offering a breathtaking view of Manhattan's glittering skyline. After a moment's hesitation, Jack took Penny's hand and followed. The office was a study in minimalist elegance. White walls, black furniture, a few carefully chosen pieces of modern art. But what caught Penny's attention was the bank of monitors on a side desk displaying various charts and graphs. Wow, Penny breathed immediately, gravitating toward the screens. Is that real-time market data? Both adults turned to stare at her. Jack felt heat rise to his cheeks. She watches the financial news with me sometimes. Helps me practice my explanations. Catherine moved to one of the computers and pulled up a simple coding program. Can you show me what you know? For the next 20 minutes, Jack watched in amazement as his daughter demonstrated basic loops and functions, her small fingers flying over the keyboard while Catherine occasionally offered guidance. The CEO's entire demeanor had transformed. The ice had melted, revealing someone who seemed almost human. She's exceptional, Catherine said quietly to Jack while Penny focused on solving a problem. Her logical processing, her vocabulary, her emotional intelligence. Have you had her tested? Jack's jaw tightened. We're doing fine. I'm not suggesting otherwise. Catherine's voice was careful, measured. But gifts like hers, they should be nurtured. There are program schools. That cost more than I make in a year, Jack interrupted, then caught himself. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. Daddy, look, Penny exclaimed. I made it draw a spider web. Sure enough, on the screen was a geometric web pattern created through simple code. Catherine leaned in to examine it, and for a moment her shoulder brushed against Penny's. The child looked up at her with pure delight. My mother used to say I was too smart for my own good, Catherine said suddenly, so quietly Jack almost missed it. She died when I was 8. Penny's face grew solemn. That's sad. My mama died when I was 4. But Daddy says she's still with us in our hearts. Yes, Catherine whispered. I suppose she is. The moment stretched between them, a janitor, a CEO, and a little girl who'd somehow bridged an impossible gap. Then Catherine's phone buzzed, shattering the spell. She glanced at it, and the mask slipped back into place. Tokyo markets, she explained unnecessarily. We should go, Jack said, sensing the shift. Penny, help me gather your things. Wait. Catherine stood, walked to her desk, and pulled out a business card. She wrote something on the back and handed it to Jack. My direct line. If you ever find yourself without childcare again, call me. I'm here most nights anyway. And she paused, looking at Penny, who was carefully packing her book. She's welcome. Jack stared at the card like it might bite him. Miss Montgomery, I don't think. It's not charity, she said sharply, then softened. Consider it an investment in potential. Besides, this place could use some life after hours. As they prepared to leave, Penny tugged on Catherine's blazer. Miss Montgomery, thank you for not being mad and for teaching me about nested loops. Catherine crouched down to Penny's level. Thank you for showing me your spider web. Charlotte would be proud. They left her standing there, silhouetted against the city lights, looking more alone than any person surrounded by such success had a right to be. As the elevator descended, Penny slipped her small hand into Jack's. I like her, she announced. She's sad, though, like how I was sad before you showed me that Mama's love stays with us. Jack squeezed her hand, thinking about the card in his pocket and the strange turn their night had taken. He'd come to work terrified of losing everything. Instead, something entirely unexpected had begun. But as they stepped out into the pre-dawn darkness of Manhattan, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that Catherine Montgomery's sudden interest in his daughter was more complicated than simple kindness. The way she'd looked at Penny, recognition, longing, and something that might have been fear, suggested this was far from over. Daddy, Penny asked as they walked toward the subway. Do you think she'll really let me come back? Jack looked up at the towering building behind them at the single-lit window on the 57th floor. I don't know, sweetheart. I really don't know. But even as he said it, he knew with certainty that their lives had just taken a turn he couldn't yet understand. Catherine Montgomery didn't do anything without a reason. And whatever her reason for opening her door to them, Jack suspected it would change everything. 3 nights passed before Jack found himself standing outside Montgomery Industries again, Penny's small hand in his. This time it wasn't desperation that brought them here. It was the carefully worded text message he'd received that afternoon. Board meeting running late. If you're working tonight, Penny is welcome to use the conference room on 56. Books and puzzles inside. KM. Jack had stared at his phone for a full minute rereading the message. His supervisor, Frank, had merely shrugged when asked about it. Got an email from the top today saying you're cleared to bring your kid if needed. Must be nice to have friends in high places, Sullivan. Now as they rode the service elevator up, Penny practically vibrated with excitement. She wore her good outfit, a purple sweater and jeans without holes, and carried a small backpack with her homework and books. Remember the rules, Jack said for the third time. Stay in the conference room, don't touch anything expensive, and be invisible. Penny finished. But Daddy, Miss Catherine said I was welcome. That's the opposite of invisible. Before he could respond, the elevator opened on the 56th floor. Unlike the executive level above this floor, hummed with activity despite the late hour. Through glass walls, Jack could see Catherine in the main conference room, standing before a presentation screen, addressing a room full of stern-faced board members. She wore a Navy power suit tonight, her hair in its signature bun. But something was different. Her usual composure seemed frayed at the edges. Her hands, Jack noticed, trembled slightly as she clicked through slides showing profit projections. This way, sweetheart. Jack guided Penny to a smaller conference room down the hall. True to Catherine's word, someone had prepared it. Children's books were stacked on the table along with puzzles, coloring supplies, and a tablet loaded with educational games. A note card in Catherine's precise handwriting read, "Make yourself at home, K." Wow. Penny breathed, immediately gravitating toward the books. She remembered I liked Charlotte's Web. Look, there's more books about spiders. Jack set up Penny with her homework, unable to shake his unease. Why was Catherine Montgomery, the notorious Iron Lady, going out of her way for them? He'd Googled her after their first encounter, finding article after article about her meteoric rise, her father's sudden death, her reputation for crushing competitors. Nothing about her suggested she'd be the type to set up an impromptu children's library. I'll be right outside if you need me, he told Penny, who was already absorbed in a book about tarantulas. Jack began his cleaning routine, but his eyes kept drifting to the main conference room. The meeting looked tense. One older man kept jabbing his finger at papers, his face red with apparent anger. Catherine stood her ground, but Jack could see the strain in her shoulders, the way she gripped the podium. He was emptying wastebaskets when the conference room door burst open. Board members filed out, their expressions ranging from frustrated to furious. The red-faced man paused near Jack, speaking loudly to a colleague. 27 years old and thinks she knows better than everyone. Her father would be rolling in his grave. This worker dignity initiative nonsense will tank our fourth quarter. They moved on, leaving Jack with more questions. Worker dignity initiative. Minutes later, Catherine emerged alone. She looked exhausted, defeat written in every line of her body. Her eyes met Jack's across the floor, widening slightly, as if she'd forgotten he'd be there. Ms. Montgomery, he started, but she waved him off. Is Penny in the small conference room? At his nod, she straightened her shoulders. I should say hello. Jack followed, watching as Catherine knocked gently before entering. Penny looked up with a bright smile that seemed to physically impact the CEO. Miss Catherine, I finished my math homework. Do you want to check it? Daddy usually does, but you probably know math better since you run a whole company. To Jack's amazement, Catherine sat down beside Penny, reviewing her homework with genuine interest. Very good. You carried the one perfectly here. Though in this problem, there's actually a faster way. For the next 20 minutes, Jack cleaned the surrounding offices while stealing glances at the unlikely pair. Catherine taught Penny mathematical shortcuts, her face more animated than he'd ever seen it. Penny, in turn, chattered about school, her favorite subjects, and her dream of becoming either a scientist or a writer, or maybe both like Isaac Asimov. You know Asimov, Catherine's surprise was evident. Daddy reads me his robot stories. I like the three laws. They're logical, but also about being good, which is important. Catherine fell silent, studying Penny with that same unreadable expression from their first meeting. My father used to read those to me, she said finally, before he decided fiction was a waste of time. The vulnerability in her voice made Jack pause in his work. Penny, with the emotional intuition children sometimes possess, reached out and patted Catherine's hand. Maybe he was just scared, Penny offered. Sometimes grown-ups get scared of things that make them feel too much. Catherine stared at the small hand on hers. That's very perceptive. Ms. Wilson says I'm perceptive. That's my counselor at school. I see her because sometimes I get sad about Mama, and that's okay. Your counselor sounds wise, Catherine said softly. She glanced at Jack, who'd given up pretending to work, and stood in the doorway. Your daughter is remarkable, Mr. Sullivan. I know, he said simply, though I can't take much credit. She's been this way since she could talk. Catherine stood smoothing her skirt. I should let you both get back to your evening. But she hesitated, then pulled out her phone. There's a STEM program for gifted children at the Natural History Museum. Saturdays. I have a contact there who owes me a favor. If you're interested. Jack's pride warred with his desire to give Penny every opportunity. We'll think about it. Of course, Catherine moved toward the door, then turned back. Penny, what did you mean earlier about grown-ups being scared of feeling too much? Penny looked up from her book, considering the question with six-year-old seriousness. Well, when Daddy first told me about Mama going to heaven, he tried not to cry. But I told him it's okay to cry because tears just mean love has nowhere else to go. Maybe some grown-ups forget that feeling things means you're alive. The silence that followed was deafening. Catherine's carefully constructed mask cracked completely, and for a moment Jack saw raw pain flash across her features. Then without a word, she fled. Did I say something wrong? Penny asked, worried. Jack pulled his daughter into a hug. No, sweetheart. I think you said exactly what she needed to hear. They finished their evening quietly. Jack completed his rounds while Penny read, occasionally sharing interesting spider facts. But his mind kept returning to Catherine's reaction to the board member's angry words about a worker dignity initiative. As they prepared to leave, Jack noticed Catherine's office light was still on. Through the glass, he could see her at her desk, no longer the composed CEO, but a young woman staring blankly at her computer screen. Wait here, he told Penny, then knocked on Catherine's door. Come in, she called her voice professional again. Jack entered cautiously. We're heading out. I wanted to thank you for accommodating Penny again. It's no trouble. She didn't look up from her screen. Did she enjoy the books? Very much. He hesitated, then plunged ahead. Miss Montgomery, is everything all right? That meeting seemed challenging, she laughed bitterly. That's one word for it. When you try to implement programs that prioritize employee well-being over profit margins, the board tends to revolt. The Worker Dignity Initiative. Her eyes snapped to his sharp with surprise. You heard that? Hard not to. Guy was pretty loud. Catherine leaned back in her chair, suddenly looking far younger than 27. My father built this company on the principle of maximum profit at any cost. I'm trying to prove you can be successful and still treat people like humans. The board disagrees. That's admirable, Jack said carefully. Is it, or is it naive? She rubbed her temples. Sometimes I think they're right that I'm too young, too emotional, too focused on people instead of profits. That I'm trying to fix something in the company because I couldn't fix. She stopped abruptly. Fix what? Jack asked gently. Nothing, I'm sorry. I shouldn't be. She straightened, rebuilding her walls. You should get Penny home. It's late. Jack recognized dismissal, but couldn't leave without saying one thing. Miss Montgomery, I've worked here 3 years. I've seen how employees were treated before and after you took over. The health insurance improvements, the daycare subsidy program, the mental health resources, those aren't naive. They're human. She looked at him then, really looked at him. Your wife, she said suddenly. Penny mentioned she passed 2 years ago. Cancer. Jack's throat tightened. Car accident. Drunk driver. I'm sorry. Thank you. Is hard. But Penny keeps me going. She's everything good about her mother and then some. She's lucky to have you, Catherine said softly. Not all fathers. She trailed off again. Well, Jack said after a moment, we'll see you around. Actually, Catherine pulled out a folder from her desk. This is the information about the STEM program. No obligations, but look it over. Jack took the folder. We will. As he turned to leave, Catherine called out, Mr. Sullivan, what Penny said about tears meaning love has nowhere to go. Did she come up with that herself? She did, Jack confirmed. Right after the funeral. She's got an old soul, my Penny. Catherine nodded slowly. An old soul, she repeated. Yes, I think you were right. Walking back to collect Penny, Jack found his daughter had cleaned up the conference room, leaving everything exactly as she'd found it, except for a picture she'd drawn and left on the table. It showed three figures, a tall man, a small girl, and a woman with dark hair standing together under a spiderweb that formed a protective canopy over them. At the bottom, in careful letters she'd written, for Miss Catherine from Penny, P.S. Charlotte says hi. Should we leave it? Penny asked. I think she'd like that, Jack said, though he wondered what Catherine would make of being drawn into their little family portrait. As they rode the elevator down, Penny yawned. Daddy, I think Miss Catherine is like Wilbur at the beginning of the book. She thinks she's alone, but she's not. She just hasn't met her Charlotte yet. Maybe not, Jack agreed, though privately, he wondered if Penny herself might be playing the role of Charlotte weaving connections where none had existed before saving someone who didn't even know they needed saving. The night air was crisp as they exited the building. Looking back, Jack saw Catherine's silhouette in her office window. She was holding Penny's drawing, her shoulders shaking in what might have been laughter or tears. Come on, little spider, he told Penny. Time to get you to bed. But as they walked to the subway, the folder about the STEM program tucked under his arm, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that their lives were becoming entangled with Catherine Montgomery's in ways that went far beyond a simple act of kindness. Penny, with her startling wisdom and open heart, had seen through the CEO's armor to the wounded soul beneath. The question was, what would Catherine do now that she'd been seen? As if in answer to his thoughts, his phone buzzed. A text from Catherine. Thank Penny for the picture. Tell her Charlotte says hi back. Jack smiled despite himself. Maybe Penny was right. Maybe Catherine Montgomery, the Iron Lady of Manhattan's corporate world, just needed a friend. And maybe, just maybe, they all needed each other more than any of them realized. Saturday arrived gray and drizzling, matching Jack's anxious mood as he stood with Penny outside the Natural History Museum. She bounced on her toes, utterly unconcerned by the weather, clutching the acceptance letter for the STEM program trial session. Do you think there'll be other kids like me? She asked for the 10th time. Kids who like spiders and robots and asking lots of questions. I'm sure there will be, sweetheart. Jack adjusted her rain jacket, trying to quiet his own doubts. The other families entering the museum looked like they'd stepped from a different world. Designer clothes, casual mentions of vacation homes, children comparing notes on their private tutors. Mr. Sullivan, Jack turned to find Catherine approaching under a black umbrella. She wore jeans and a sweater, the most casual he'd ever seen her, yet still managed to look like she'd walked off a magazine cover. Ms. Montgomery, I didn't expect... I mentioned I had a contact here. Thought I'd make the introduction personally. She knelt to Penny's level. Ready for your adventure. Penny beamed. I read 3 more books about spiders this week. Did you know some tarantulas can live for 30 years? I didn't, Catherine admitted, and Jack caught what might have been a genuine smile. Shall we go learn more? Inside, Catherine led them through marble halls to a classroom where about 15 children were already gathered. The instructor, Dr. Chen, greeted Catherine warmly. Catherine, so this is the brilliant Penny you told me about. Dr. Chen shook Penny's hand seriously. We're going to be studying biomimicry today, how scientists copy nature to solve problems. Perfect for someone who loves spiders. As Penny eagerly joined the other children, Jack pulled Catherine aside. You didn't have to come. I wanted to. She watched Penny interact with the other kids, her expression thoughtful. I was in this program once 20 years ago. My mother brought me. She shook her head. Anyway, I thought you might appreciate a familiar face. They settled in this parent observation area. Jack noticed the other parents glancing at Catherine with recognition and curiosity. She seemed oblivious, her attention fixed on Penny, who was already raising her hand to answer questions. She's fearless, Catherine murmured. I was terrified my first day, convinced the other kids would realize I didn't belong. You terrified, Jack couldn't hide his surprise. Hard to believe, I know. Her laugh was self-deprecating. My father had just started making real money. We'd moved from Queens to the Upper East Side, and suddenly I was surrounded by kids who had been wealthy since birth. I felt like a fraud. Jack studied her profile. Penny mentioned you're from Queens originally. We're in Astoria. Astoria, Catherine repeated softly. We lived there until I was 7, the small apartment above a bodega. My mother worked 2 jobs while my father built his first company in our living room. Her voice grew distant. She died the year we moved. Heart condition nobody knew about. One day she was helping me with homework, the next. I'm sorry, Jack said, understanding dawning. Penny was 6, almost 7, the same age Catherine had been when her world shattered. My father threw himself into work after that, built his empire, gave me everything except. She stopped, seeming to remember who she was talking to. I apologize. You don't need to hear this. Sometimes it helps to talk, Jack offered, especially to someone who understands loss. Catherine turned to him, then really looking at him for the first time. Not as the CEO to the janitor, but as 2 people who'd survived the unsurvivable. How do you do it, she asked. Raise Penny alone. Keep her so untouched by grief. Jack considered the question. Through the window, Penny was building something with blocks, collaborating with a boy her age, both of them laughing. I don't shield her from grief, he said finally. We talk about her mother all the time. Look at photos, share stories. The grief is there, but so is the love. They exist together. He paused. Penny taught me that, actually. She processes emotions like someone 3 times her age. The tears meaning love has nowhere to go, Catherine quoted softly. Exactly. She came up with that at 4 years old. Sometimes I think she's the one raising me. They watched in comfortable silence as the class progressed. Penny threw herself into every activity with enthusiasm, her hands shooting up with questions that made Dr. Chen's eyes widen with impressed surprise. There's something I should tell you, Catherine said suddenly. The program is expensive, prohibitively so, but they have sponsorships available. Full rides for exceptional students. Jack's jaw tightened. Ms. Montgomery. The sponsorship is anonymous, she continued. The family never knows who's funding it. It could be anyone, a corporation, a wealthy donor, the museum itself. She kept her eyes fixed on Penny. All they see is that their child was selected based on merit, and Penny was selected based on merit. Dr. Chen reviewed her test scores, the sample work you submitted. She's genuinely excited to have Penny in the program. Catherine finally met his eyes. The sponsorship just removes the financial barrier. Jack wrestled with his pride. Why? He asked bluntly. Why are you doing this? Catherine was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. My mother died before she could see what I'd become. But when she was alive, she used to tell me that success meant nothing if you didn't lift others as you climbed. She smiled sadly. I've been very successful, Mr. Sullivan, but I haven't done much lifting. The Worker Dignity Initiative is failing. The admission seemed to pain her. The board votes next week. They'll kill it, redistribute the funds to shareholder dividends. They're probably right. I'm too young, too idealistic. You're trying to honor your mother, Jack interrupted. That's not idealistic, that's human. Catherine's eyes widened, then grew bright with unshed tears. I thank you. Through the window, Penny had moved to a microscope station examining spider silk samples. Her face glowed with wonder as Dr. Chen explained the properties that made spider silk stronger than steel. Can I ask you something? Catherine said. How did you meet Penny's mother? Jack smiled at the memory. College library finals week. She was studying biochemistry. I was in computer science. I accidentally knocked over her tower of books. She said if I helped her reorganize them, she'd help me with my calculus. We spent the next 12 hours talking about everything except schoolwork. Love at first sight. Love at first conversation, Jack corrected. Laura had this way of seeing the world, finding wonder in everything. Penny has that same gift. He glanced at Catherine. You had someone like that once. Your mother. Yes, Catherine whispered. I did. The class began wrapping up. Penny bounced over to them, eyes sparkling. Did you see I got to look at actual spider silk under the microscope? It has these tiny proteins that make it stretchy and strong, And Dr. Chen says next week we'll learn about how scientists are trying to copy it to make better materials. Breathe, sweetheart. Jack laughed, but his heart swelled with pride. Did you like it? Catherine asked. Penny nodded enthusiastically, then grew serious. Thank you for telling me about this place. Some of the kids have been coming for years and know everything already, but they were nice and showed me things. I'm glad, Catherine said softly. Learning is better with friends. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Chen pulled Jack aside. Your daughter is exceptional, Mr. Sullivan. Not just her intelligence, though, that's remarkable, but her emotional intelligence, her creativity, her collaborative spirit. With the right nurturing, she could go far. We'll do our best, Jack said, very aware of Catherine listening nearby. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean. Penny walked between them, chattering about her favorite parts of the class. As they reached the subway entrance, Catherine hesitated. What are your plans for the rest of the day? Jack shrugged. Grocery shopping, laundry, glamorous Saturday stuff. There's a butterfly conservatory in the park, Catherine said, not quite meeting his eyes. I haven't been in years, but I remember they have an exhibit on spider habitats. If Penny's interested, Penny's gasp was answer enough. She looked up at Jack with pleading eyes. I don't want to impose on your weekend, Jack started. But Catherine shook her head. You wouldn't be. I usually spend Saturdays in the office. This would be… No, she searched for words. Different. Good different. And so Jack found himself spending the afternoon in Central Park with his daughter and one of New York's most powerful CEOs. Catherine shed her corporate armor layer by layer as Penny drew her into increasingly animated discussions about insect science and life. At the Butterfly Conservatory, Penny stood transfixed as butterflies landed on her outstretched hands. Catherine watched with an expression of wonder that matched Penny's, as if she too were seeing magic for the first time in years. My mother brought me here once, Catherine said quietly to Jack. I must have been Penny's age. I remember thinking the butterflies were like flying flowers. She smiled at the memory. I tried to bring one home. Mom had to explain why they needed to stay in their special garden. You wanted to keep beauty close, Jack observed. Nothing wrong with that. Except when you cage it, Catherine replied. Then it stops being beautiful. Jack thought about that as he watched Penny gently encourage a monarch butterfly to climb onto Catherine's hand. The CEO stood perfectly still, barely breathing, as if afraid to disturb the moment. See, Penny whispered, if you're very calm and patient, they trust you. Trust, Catherine repeated, watching the butterfly flex its orange and black wings. Such a fragile thing. The butterfly flew away, but Catherine remained still looking at her hand as if she could still feel its tiny weight. Miss Catherine, Penny tugged on her sleeve, do you want to see the spider exhibit now? They spent another hour exploring Penny, alternating between teaching Catherine spider facts and asking increasingly complex questions about business, science, and why grown-ups made things so complicated. Because we forget, Catherine answered one such question. We forget that the simplest solution is often the best one. As the afternoon wore on, Jack noticed the change in Catherine. The tension in her shoulders eased. Her smiles came more frequently. She laughed, actually laughed, when Penny attempted to demonstrate a spider's mating dance she'd read about. You're different with her, Jack observed while Penny was engrossed in reading an information panel. She makes it easy to remember, Catherine said simply. Who I was before I became who I'm supposed to be. They parted ways as the sun began to set. Penny hugged Catherine goodbye, a gesture that clearly startled the CEO. Thank you for the butterfly garden and the spider exhibit, and for listening to all my questions, even the silly ones, Penny said in one breath. None of your questions are silly, Catherine assured her, and thank you for sharing your Saturday with me. As they watched her walk away, Penny slipped her hand into Jack's. She smiled more today. Yes, she did. That's good. Smiles are like butterflies. They make everything more beautiful. Penny yawned. Can we invite her to do things with us again? Jack thought about the risks, the complications, the vast gulf between their worlds. Then he thought about the yurt on Catherine's face when the butterfly landed on her hand, the way she'd listened to Penny with complete attention, the loneliness that radiated from her, even in a crowded room. We'll see, sweetheart. We'll see. But he already knew the answer. Penny had a gift for seeing people who needed saving even when they didn't know it themselves. And Catherine Montgomery, for all her power and success, needed saving as much as any lost soul Penny had ever found. The question was whether Catherine would let herself be saved or whether the weight of her past and the demands of her present would prove too strong for even Penny's magic to overcome. 1 week later, Jack arrived at work to find the building abuzz with whispers. Something big was happening on the executive floor. As he loaded his cart with supplies, Frank pulled him aside. "Board's voting on that worker dignity thing today," his supervisor muttered. "Word is they're going to kill it. Goodbye improved health care, hello bigger bonuses for the suits." Jack's stomach knotted. He thought of Catherine's defeated expression after the last board meeting, her admission that she was fighting a losing battle. He thought of the single mother on his floor who'd been able to afford her son's insulin because of the improved health plan, the young father who could finally work a stable schedule because of the subsidized childcare program. "When's the vote?" Jack asked. "Started 20 minutes ago. Montgomery's making her last stand, but Reynolds has the votes locked up." Thomas Reynolds, the red-faced man who'd been so dismissive of Catherine's vision. Jack had learned his name in the past week, had heard the maintenance staff talk about how Reynolds represented the old guard profit above all else. As Jack rode the service elevator up, Penny clutched his hand. "Daddy, you look worried." "Just thinking about work stuff, kiddo." "Is it about Miss Catherine? You've been checking your phone a lot." Jack managed a smile. "You notice everything, don't you?" "Not everything, just important things." The elevator opened on the 56th floor and immediately Jack sensed the tension. A small crowd of employees had gathered near the boardroom, their expressions anxious. Through the glass walls, he could see Catherine standing at the head of the table, shoulders squared, facing down the row of executives. "Sullivan." Jack turned to see Reynolds' executive assistant approaching, her expression pinched. "Mr. Reynolds wants the executive bathroom fixtures polished immediately. He's bringing in some Japanese investors this afternoon." "I'll get right on it," Jack replied, though every instinct told him to stay near the boardroom. Catherine looked so alone in there, surrounded by people who saw dollar signs where she saw human beings. As he guided Penny toward the small conference room that had become her sanctuary, the lights suddenly flickered, then went out completely. Emergency generators kicked in a second later, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. "Daddy?" Penny whispered, her fingers tightening around his. "It's okay, sweetheart. Just a power outage." In the confusion, voices from the boardroom grew louder, spilling into the hallway. Reynolds' voice cut through the chaos. "This is exactly why we need to refocus on infrastructure rather than your pet projects, Catherine. Basics. Building maintenance is suffering while you're busy playing social justice warrior. The power grid is down across Midtown Thomas. Not everything is a referendum on my leadership." Jack felt Penny's hand slip from his as she drifted toward the boardroom, drawn by the conflict. "Penny, wait." But she was already pushing open the door. 12 pairs of eyes turned to stare at the small girl in unicorn-patterned leggings who'd interrupted their corporate coup. "I'm sorry," Penny said, her voice trembling slightly. "I got scared when the lights went out, but then I heard you all shouting, and that made me more scared because when grown-ups shout, it means something's really wrong." "Who is this child?" Reynolds demanded. "Security should—" "She's with me," Catherine said quietly. "Penny, it's all right. The lights will come back on soon." But Penny wasn't looking at the lights. She was studying the faces around the table with that unnervingly perceptive gaze of hers. "You're all mad at Miss Catherine because she wants to help people." "It's more complicated than that," one of the board members started. "Is it?" Penny tilted her head. "My daddy says Miss Catherine made it so he has good insurance and can take care of me. And she made a place where employees' kids can stay while their parents work. That doesn't sound complicated. It sounds nice." "Nice doesn't pay dividends?" someone muttered. Penny's face scrunched in concentration. "What are dividends?" Money for people who own parts of the company," Catherine explained softly. "Oh." Penny processed this. "So you all want more money instead of helping people like my daddy." The uncomfortable silence stretched. Jack finally reached Penny, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Ms. Montgomery. We'll go." "No," Catherine said suddenly. "Let her stay. After all, she's exactly who this affects, the daughter of an employee, the future we're supposedly building for. She looked around the table. Can any of you look her in the eye and explain why her father's health care should be cut so your portfolios can grow by 2%? This is highly inappropriate, Reynolds blustered. Using a child as a prop. I'm not using anyone, Catherine interrupted, but maybe we all need reminding that our decisions affect real people. People like Jack, who works nights to support his daughter alone. People like Penny, who's brilliant and kind and deserves every opportunity to succeed. The lights flickered back on. In the harsh fluorescent glare, Jack could see the calculation in the board member's eyes shifting. Penny, seemingly oblivious to the tension, had noticed the papers on the table. Are those graphs? I love graphs. She peered at one showing employee satisfaction scores. Look, this line goes up. That means people are happier, right? Yes, Catherine said, a small smile playing at her lips. It does. And this one, Penny studied another chart. Oh, this shows kids in the company daycare. There are so many. Do they all have parents who work here? They do, Catherine confirmed. That's like a big family, Penny announced. My teacher says families take care of each other. Is that what you're trying to do? Miss Catherine, make the company like a big family. Several board members exchanged glances. An older woman who'd suggested bringing in an advisor to oversee Catherine at the last meeting cleared her throat. Perhaps we should table the vote for now. Review the financials more thoroughly. I agree, another member said quickly. Let's revisit the budget allocations next quarter. See if there's a middle ground. Reynolds looked ready to explode, but he was suddenly outnumbered. One by one, the board members filed out, several pausing to look at Penny with expressions ranging from curiosity to shame. When they were alone, Catherine sank into a chair, her professional mask finally falling completely. Thank you, she whispered to Penny. You said what I've been trying to say for months. I just told the truth, Penny said simply. Daddy says the truth is always the right thing, even when it's hard. Jack found his voice. Penny, you can't just walk into important meetings. She saved me, Catherine interrupted. They were going to kill the initiative today. Maybe call for my resignation next month. She looked at Penny with wonder. How did you know exactly what to say? Penny shrugged. They reminded me of the mean kids at school who don't want to share toys. Sometimes you have to remind them that sharing makes everyone happier. Catherine laughed, a real, genuine laugh that transformed her face. Out of the mouths of babes. She stood composing herself. Jack, I owe you an apology. I've been using your daughter as, I don't know, a reminder of who I used to be. That's not fair to either of you. You've been kind to us, Jack said carefully. That's nothing to apologize for. Kind, Catherine repeated. My father would say kindness is weakness. Your father was wrong, Penny piped up. Kindness is the strongest thing there is. It's like spider silk, invisible but super strong. Catherine knelt to Penny's level. You really are extraordinary. You know that. I'm just me, Penny said, but you're extraordinary too. You stood up to all those angry people to help families like ours. That's brave. Jack watched something shift in Catherine's expression, a wall crumbling, perhaps, or a decision being made. Penny, Catherine said slowly, would you and your father like to have dinner, not in the office, but somewhere normal? I realize I don't know much about your lives outside these walls. Penny looked to Jack, excitement bright in her eyes. He weighed the invitation, the complications it might bring. But then he thought about Catherine standing alone against 12 board members, fighting for people like them. We'd like that, he said. They ended up at a small Italian restaurant in Queens that Jack and Penny loved. Catherine seemed out of place at first in the cozy family-run establishment, but Penny's chatter soon had her relaxing. This is where Daddy brought me after my first day of kindergarten, Penny explained, twirling spaghetti expertly. I was scared nobody would like me, but then I made 3 friends and we built the tallest block tower in the class. Were you scared on your first night of school? She asked Catherine. Terrified, Catherine admitted. I was so worried about saying the wrong thing that I didn't speak at all. The teacher thought I didn't know English. But you found your voice, Penny observed. Just like today, sometimes it just takes time to be brave. As they ate, Jack found himself seeing Catherine not as the intimidating CEO, but as a young woman who'd lost her way and was trying to find it again. She asked about their life, their routines, their dreams. When Penny excitedly described her favorite books, Catherine listened with genuine interest. You know, Catherine had said as Penny devoured a bowl of gelato. There's a children's science museum opening next month. They're looking for young ambassadors to help with the spider exhibit. I could put in a word. Could I really? Penny bounced in her seat. I know so much about spiders now. I could teach other kids. I think you'd be perfect, Catherine said, then glanced at Jack. If your father approves, of course. We'll see, Jack said, but his smile gave away his answer. As they prepared to leave, Penny hugged Catherine a gesture that was becoming routine but still seemed to catch the CEO off guard. Thank you for dinner and for being brave today, Penny said. And don't worry about those mean bored people. Daddy says doing the right thing isn't always the easy thing, but it's always worth it. Catherine's eyes grew bright. Your daddy's very wise. He is, Penny agreed, but you're wise too. You just forget sometimes because you're sad. The words hung in the air. Catherine looked stricken, vulnerable, in a way Jack had never seen. Penny, he warned gently. It's okay, Catherine said softly. She's right, I am sad. I've been down for a very long time. Penny took Catherine's hand. That's okay, sad doesn't last forever. My counselor says feelings are like weather. They come and go. Even the biggest storms end eventually. Catherine squeezed Penny's small hand. What did I do to deserve you in my life? You needed us, Penny said simply, and we needed you too. That's how friendship works. On the subway ride home, Penny curled against Jack's side, exhausted from the evening's excitement. Daddy, is it okay that I told those bored people the truth? You did the right thing, baby, though next time maybe wait for an invitation before joining a board meeting. Penny giggled. They looked so surprised, but I think some of them remembered they have hearts. What about Catherine? What do you think of her? Penny was quiet for a moment. She's like a butterfly stuck in a chrysalis. She wants to come out and be beautiful, but she's scared. Maybe we can help her not be scared anymore. Jack pressed a kiss to his daughter's head. Maybe we can. But as the train rumbled through the tunnels, he wondered what would happen when Catherine fully emerged from her chrysalis. Would she fly away, leaving them behind? Or would she stay, adding her colors to their small but vibrant world? Time would tell. But for tonight, they'd shared spaghetti and laughter with one of the most powerful women in New York, and she'd seemed genuinely happy. Penny had a gift for bringing light to dark places, and Catherine Montgomery's life had been dark for far too long. As they reached their stop, Jack's phone buzzed with a message from Catherine. Thank you both for tonight. I can't remember the last time I felt so normal. Is that strange, Kay? Ita, Jack typed back. Not strange at all. Sometimes normal is extraordinary. The response came quickly. Your daughter is rubbing off on you with these pearls of wisdom. Jack smiled as he helped a sleepy Penny up the subway stairs. Maybe so, he whispered to himself. Maybe so. The first system failure hit Montgomery Industries at 3:17 a.m. on a cold Tuesday in November. Jack had just finished cleaning the executive bathrooms when the overhead lights flickered, dimmed, then died completely. For 5 long seconds, the 57th floor was plunged into darkness before emergency lighting bathed the corridors in an eerie red glow. Not unusual during fall storms, but the weather outside was clear and calm. That's the 3rd time this month, Frank grumbled, materializing from around the corner. Building systems are going to hell since they cut the maintenance budget. To fund executive bonuses, Jack finished, a familiar bitterness creeping into his voice. The Worker Dignity Initiative had survived the last board meeting, thanks to Penny's unexpected intervention, but Reynolds had managed to slash the building operations budget instead. Death by 1,000 cuts. The walkie-talkie on Frank's belt crackled. Sullivan, get down to the server room, something's smoking. Jack frowned. Shouldn't you call a tea? It's not here at 3 a.m. and we need to make sure nothing's on fire. Besides, you used to be some kind of computer guy, right? Jack hesitated. He'd spent years burying his former life, the engineering career derailed by grief and single parenthood. Only Penny and Catherine knew about his background, and he preferred keeping it that way. Janitors didn't get asked questions. They didn't have to explain their failures. The server room on the 32nd floor was chaos when Jack arrived. 2 security guards stood helplessly watching smoke seep from behind a rack of equipment while the night manager paced frantically. Thank God. The manager spotted Jack. Can you do anything if we lose these servers? We lose millions. I'm just the janitor. Jack started but found himself moving toward the equipment anyway. Old instincts taking over muscle memory from a previous life. He examined the rack following the smoke to a backup power supply that was clearly overheating. Kill the power to this unit, now. We can't. These servers control the trading algorithms. They'll be slag in 5 minutes if you don't. Jack's voice had changed, carrying an authority he hadn't used in years. The manager blinked, then complied. Working quickly, Jack traced the problem to a catastrophically failing cooling system. With the immediate danger contained, he implemented a temporary solution, rerouting coolant from less critical systems. Where did you learn to do that? The manager watched in amazement as the smoke dissipated and warning lights switched from red to amber. Community college, Jack lied, unwilling to explain his engineering degree from MIT or his 3 years designing cooling systems for high-performance computing clusters. By dawn, he'd stabilized the system enough for the day shift to take over. Exhausted, he collected Penny from the conference room, where she'd slept through the whole ordeal, and headed home. You fixed something big, Penny observed as they walked to the subway, noticing the grease stains on his uniform. With computers. Jack nodded, surprised by the strange mixture of pride and sadness that filled his chest. For a few hours, he'd been his old self again, competent, respected, using his brain instead of his mop. It felt good, he admitted quietly, using those skills again. You should do it more, Penny said with 6-year-old certainty. Your eyes look different when you talk about computers, more sparkly. When they returned to work that evening, the atmosphere had changed. People nodded at Jack as security guards, who'd previously ignored him, now acknowledged his presence. Word had spread. Sullivan, Thomas Reynolds' voice stopped Jack cold. The board chairman stood by the executive elevator, his expression unreadable. A word. Jack braced himself for termination. He'd stepped outside his role, interfered with systems he had no business touching. You neglected to mention your technical expertise when you applied here. Reynolds studied him like an unusual specimen. MIT graduate with honors, senior engineer at Techdyne before your unfortunate circumstances. Jack stiffened. Reynolds had investigated him. Your intervention last night saved us considerable downtime. The question is, why is someone with your qualifications mopping floors? Life happens, Jack replied, unwilling to discuss Laura's death. The medical bills, the spiral of grief that had left him unable to handle a demanding tech job while raising a traumatized child alone. Indeed. Reynolds' eyes narrowed. Catherine seems quite taken with you and your daughter. Quite the coincidence that you happen to be a skilled engineer masquerading as a janitor. The implication hung in the air. Reynolds thought Jack was playing some angle, using Penny to get close to Catherine for personal gain. I'm just doing my job, sir, the one I'm paid for. For now, Reynolds smiled thinly, but opportunists always reveal themselves eventually. Before Jack could respond, the elevator doors opened to reveal Catherine, who seemed surprised to find them together. Thomas, Jack. Her eyes flicked between them, sensing the tension. Is everything all right? Just complimenting Sullivan on his heroics last night, Reynolds replied smoothly. Hidden talents are always intriguing. He entered the elevator, leaving Jack and Catherine in uncomfortable silence. He's having me investigated, Jack said once Reynolds was gone. Catherine sighed. I'm not surprised. Thomas sees conspiracies everywhere. She studied Jack's face. Why didn't you tell me about your engineering background? It wasn't relevant to cleaning floors. It's relevant to who you are. Catherine's voice softened. The technical team is raving about your work. They said you improvised a cooling solution that shouldn't have been possible with the available components. Jack shrugged. It wasn't that impressive, just basic thermodynamics and some creative repurposing. Stop that. Catherine's sudden sharpness surprised him. Stop diminishing yourself. Do you know how rare that kind of problem solving is? We have PhDs who couldn't have done what you did. The directness of her gaze made him uncomfortable. It had been easier when she'd seen him as just a janitor, someone to help, perhaps befriend, but not someone to respect professionally. I should get to work, Jack gestured to his cart. The board is holding an emergency session next week, Catherine said, changing subjects. Reynolds is making another run at the Worker Dignity Initiative. He's using the server incident as evidence that we're neglecting core infrastructure while wasting money on, quote, social experiments. Will he succeed this time? Not if I can help it, her jaw set with determination. My presentation needs to be irrefutable. I'm working all weekend on the numbers. You'll convince them, Jack said, believing it. He'd seen Catherine's passion, her strategic mind. Perhaps, she smiled slightly. Penny's welcome to use the conference room if you're working. I'll be here anyway, drowning in spreadsheets. As she walked away, Jack noticed something different in her posture, a slight hesitation as if she wanted to say more but stopped herself. He found himself watching her longer than he should, admiring the quiet determination in her stride, the way she carried the weight of an entire company on shoulders that suddenly seemed less armored than before. The next night, the security system failed catastrophically. Cameras went dark, door locks malfunctioned, and the overnight security team found themselves locked out of their own monitoring station. Jack was summoned again, this time directly by Catherine. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't an emergency, she explained, leading him to the security hub, where technicians were frantically trying to restore the system. We're completely vulnerable right now, and we have extremely sensitive materials in the building. Jack assessed the situation quickly. The security system had been compromised at a fundamental level, not a simple malfunction, but something that looked suspiciously like sabotage. This wasn't an accident, he told Catherine quietly, showing her irregularities in the code. Someone deliberately inserted these errors. Her face paled. Corporate espionage or an inside job? Jack glanced toward the security team. When did the problem start? After the last board meeting, when we announced the revised budget. Catherine's expression hardened. When Thomas won his first round of cuts. Jack worked through the night untangling the corrupted code and rebuilding the security protocols. It was exhilarating using skills that had lain dormant for years. His fingers remembered what his conscious mind had tried to forget: the elegant logic of well-crafted code, the satisfaction of solving complex problems. By morning, he not only restored the system, but improved it, closing vulnerabilities that had existed in the original design. When he finally emerged from the security hub, Catherine was waiting with 2 cups of coffee. You didn't have to stay, Jack accepted the coffee gratefully. I wanted to see the master at work. She smiled, and Jack was struck by how different she looked, with her hair falling loose around her shoulders, her blazer discarded, the corporate mask temporarily set aside. Our security team is in awe. They want to offer you a job. I already have a job. One that doesn't use a fraction of your abilities. Catherine's eyes met his. You were different in there, Jack. Confident, commanding. You were, she hesitated. You were yourself. Jack looked away, uncomfortable with her perception. That person doesn't exist anymore. He does. I just watched him save my company from a potentially devastating security breach. She touched his arm lightly, the contact sending an unexpected current through him. Why are you so afraid of being who you really are? The question hit too close to home. Jack stepped back, creating distance. I should check on Penny. Catherine didn't push, but her eyes held a knowing sadness. Of course, she's still asleep in the conference room. I looked in on her earlier. As Jack walked away, he realized with uncomfortable clarity that Catherine Montgomery was becoming dangerous, not because she was his boss or because of their different worlds, but because she saw through his carefully constructed defenses. She recognized the man he'd been before grief and necessity had reshaped him. And worse, she believed that man still existed. The weekend arrived with storms that matched Jack's turbulent thoughts. He'd planned to take Penny to the park, but the downpour kept them indoors. By afternoon, she was restless. Can we go see Miss Catherine? Penny looked up from her book. You said she's working alone at the office today. She's very busy, sweetheart, preparing for an important meeting. Maybe we could help. Penny's expression grew serious. She's fighting the mean board people again, isn't she? Jack nodded, impressed as always by his daughter's perception. She is. Then she needs friends even more. He couldn't argue with Penny's logic, and truthfully he found himself wanting to see Catherine too, to know if she was okay to offer support in her battle against Reynolds and his allies. The Montgomery building stood nearly empty when they arrived, most employees enjoying their weekend. Catherine's office light glowed like a solitary beacon on the 57th floor. They found her surrounded by stacks of reports, her normally immaculate space transformed into a paper battlefield. Reinforcements have arrived, Penny announced, startling Catherine from her concentration. Penny, Jack, Catherine's surprise gave way to genuine pleasure. What are you doing here? Daddy said you were fighting the mean board people again. We came to help. Penny surveyed the chaos. You need snacks. People think better with snacks. Catherine laughed, the sound unexpectedly bright in the sterile office. The cafeteria is closed, but there's a vending machine. I brought cookies. Penny pulled a slightly squashed package from her backpack. And Daddy can make coffee. He makes the best coffee. For the next hour, Catherine explained her predicament, while Jack brewed coffee and Penny arranged cookies on a paper plate. Reynolds had convinced several board members that the Worker Dignity Initiative was draining resources from essential operations. Catherine needed to prove the opposite, that investing in employees actually improved productivity and reduced costs long-term. The problem is my presentation. It's too technical, too cold. Catherine pushed away a draft in frustration. I need these numbers to tell a human story, but all they see are expense lines. Jack studied her slides. You're speaking their language, metrics, ROI, profit margins. But they've already decided those aren't the values they care about. So what's the answer? Speak their language but change the story. Jack took a marker and began sketching on a whiteboard. What if instead of leading with house, you show them what they stand to? Working together, they restructured Catherine's entire presentation. Jack contributed his technical expertise, translating complex financial data into compelling narratives. Penny added her unique perspective, asking simple questions that forced them to explain concepts in human terms. As the afternoon stretched into evening, Jack found himself working seamlessly with Catherine, their minds operating in surprising synchronicity. They challenged each other's ideas, built on strengths, compensated for weaknesses. For the first time since Laura's death, Jack felt the exhilaration of intellectual partnership, the unique chemistry of two people whose thinking complemented and elevated each other. This is actually fun, Catherine admitted as they finalized the presentation near midnight. I'd forgotten work could be enjoyable. You need better colleagues, Jack teased, surprising himself with the easy familiarity that had developed between them. Clearly, her smile held something new, a warmth that transcended professional appreciation. Thank you, both of you. This is infinitely better than what I had before. Penny, who had fallen asleep on the office couch, stirred and yawned. Did we beat the mean people? Not yet. Catherine knelt beside him. But thanks to you and your dad, I have a fighting chance. Jack gathered their things, aware that they'd crossed some invisible line. He was no longer just the janitor Catherine had befriended. They'd created something together, revealed capabilities and vulnerabilities that changed the dynamic between them. We should go, he said, suddenly conscious of how domestic the scene appeared. Penny sleepy-eyed on the couch, Catherine in stocking feet himself making coffee in her office at midnight. Of course, Catherine hesitated, then asked, would you come to the board meeting Tuesday morning? I'd like you there when I present this. I'm not sure that's appropriate. You helped create it. You deserve to see it in action. Her eyes held his. Besides, I could use a friendly face in that room. Jack wanted to refuse. Being visible to the board, especially Reynolds, could jeopardize his position, but he found himself nodding anyway. What time? 9 o'clock. And Jack? Catherine reached out briefly, touching his hand. Thank you for seeing me as more than just the Ice Queen CEO. Thank you for seeing me as more than just the janitor, he replied softly. The weekend's collaboration proved fruitful. Catherine's presentation was a masterpiece of strategic persuasion, presenting the Worker Dignity Initiative not as a charitable endeavor, but as essential infrastructure for sustainable growth. The board voted to continue the program with only Reynolds and 2 allies dissenting, but victory came with consequences. Reynolds cornered Jack after the meeting, his smile sharp as broken glass. Quite the performance in there, Sullivan. One might almost think you had a hand in it. Ms. Montgomery is very capable, Jack replied neutrally. Indeed, and suddenly very interested in giving janitors a voice in corporate strategy. Reynolds leaned closer. Whatever game you're playing, it won't work. Catherine may be temporarily blinded by her charitable instincts, but the rest of us aren't so easily manipulated. There's no game, no manipulation? No. Then perhaps you'd care to explain why a man with your qualifications has spent 3 years avoiding any position that might utilize them. What are you hiding, Sullivan? Because everyone has something. The threat lingered in the air as Reynolds walked away. Jack knew the man wouldn't stop digging until he found leverage, something to use against Jack, against Catherine, against the fragile connection growing between them. That evening, Catherine extended an unexpected invitation. The annual Montgomery Industries Charity Gala was approaching, and she wanted Jack and Penny to attend. It's the social event of the season, she explained when Jack hesitated. Every major player in New York business will be there. Exactly why we shouldn't be, Jack countered. We don't exactly fit in with that crowd. That's precisely why I need you there. Catherine's voice held a hint of vulnerability he rarely heard. These events are excruciating endless small talk with people who only see me as my father's daughter or a potential business connection. Having you and Penny there would make it bearable. Jack wanted to refuse. The gala represented everything he'd walked away from in his former life, the networking, the performance of success, the carefully constructed facades. But Penny, overhearing, was already dancing with excitement at the prospect of a real princess party. One condition, Jack finally said. We leave it by 10. Penny needs her sleep. Done. Catherine's relief was palpable. I'll send a car. And Jack, thank you. The night of the gala arrived with unexpected anxiety. Jack stood before the mirror in his only suit purchased for job interviews and worn to Laura's funeral, feeling like an imposter. The man staring back at him looked like a poor facsimile of his former self, neither the confident engineer he'd once been, nor the invisible janitor he'd become. You look handsome, Daddy, Penny declared, twirling in her favorite dress, purple with silver stars, her hair in a lopsided ponytail she'd insisted on doing herself. You're biased, he smiled, straightening his tie for the 5th time. Miss Catherine will think so too, Penny added with the casual certainty of a child stating an obvious truth. The car Catherine sent was a sleek black sedan with a driver named Henry, who treated them with the same deference he would show any valued guest. As they drove through Manhattan's glittering evening landscape, Jack fought rising panic. What was he doing, taking his daughter into a world where they didn't belong? What was Catherine thinking? Inviting them into her carefully guarded public life. The Rainbow Room, 65 stories above Rockefeller Center, sparkled with old New York elegance. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across white-clothed tables, while floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the city's magnificent skyline. Men in tuxedos and women in designer gowns mingled with practiced ease, everyone seeming to know exactly where they belonged. Everyone except Jack and Penny, who stood frozen just inside the entrance, overwhelmed by the opulence. Jack, Penny. Catherine materialized before them, and Jack's breath caught. She wore a midnight blue gown that made her eyes seem impossibly bright, her hair cascading over her shoulders in soft waves. Gone was the severe corporate armor, replaced by a simple elegance that transformed her into someone both familiar and startlingly new. You came, she said, relief evident in her voice. We promised, Penny replied, then gasped. Miss Catherine, you look like a princess. So do you. Catherine crouched carefully in her gown. I love your stars. Very appropriate for being so high in the sky. Ms. Montgomery. A man appeared at her elbow, tall, handsome, in that old money way, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. You can't spend all evening hiding with whoever these people are. Jack felt Penny press closer to his side, sensing the casual dismissal in the man's tone. Richard, Catherine's voice cooled several degrees. This is Jack Sullivan and his daughter Penny. They're my guests. She turned to Jack. Jack, Penny, this is Richard, his family's company partners with ours. Richard's gaze swept over them, lingering on Jack's off-the-rack suit and Penny's self-styled hair. How charitable of you, Catherine. Though I thought this year's cause was the Children's Hospital, not... He gestured vaguely at their obvious middle-class appearance. Careful, Richard. Catherine's voice could have frozen fire. Your breeding is showing. He laughed, the sound sharp as breaking glass. Always so defensive. Your father never let emotion cloud his judgment. Perhaps that's why the board is considering alternatives. Is that a threat? An observation. He leaned closer to Catherine, deliberately excluding Jack and Penny. Dance with me. Show them you're not completely lost to your bleeding heart phase. Miss Catherine promised to show me the chocolate fountain. Penny interrupted, taking Catherine's hand. And Daddy's a really good dancer. Mama taught him, so you don't need to worry about her dancing. Richard stared at Penny as if she'd spoken in tongues. Catherine used his momentary confusion to step away. If you'll excuse us, Richard, I have promises to keep. She led them away, her hand trembling slightly in Penny's grip. Once they were out of earshot, she exhaled shakily. I apologize. Richard is, well, he's everything my father wanted me to marry. Old money, old values, old ways of thinking. You don't have to apologize, Jack said. We shouldn't have. Don't. Catherine's voice was fierce. Don't let him make you feel like you don't belong. You're worth 10 of him. They found a quieter corner where Penny could indeed marvel at an elaborate chocolate fountain. As she carefully dipped strawberries, Catherine pointed out various attendees sharing surprisingly funny observations about New York's elite. That's Margaret Ashford. She's donated millions to animal welfare but is terrified of her own poodle. And there's James Chen, brilliant investor. Can't remember his own children's names without his assistant's help. They all seem, Jack searched for a diplomatic word. Exhausting, Catherine supplied. They are. I've been performing for people like them since I was 12. She watched Penny chat with a waiter who'd brought her extra strawberries. I'd forgotten what it was like to just be real. Is that why you invited us to be your dose of reality? Catherine turned to him, and for a moment the mask slipped entirely. I invited you because you're the only people in my life who see me as Catherine, not as a Montgomery or a CEO or a merger opportunity. Is that selfish? Human, Jack corrected. Though I'm not sure we fit in your world. Maybe that's what my world needs, people who don't fit. She smiled as Penny returned chocolate smearing her chin. Having fun. The waiter said I asked better questions than the reporters, Penny announced proudly. I asked him about the chocolate fountain engineering. Of course you did. Catherine produced a napkin, gently cleaning Penny's face. The gesture was so naturally maternal that it made Jack's chest tight. Catherine. An older woman approached, elegant, silver-haired, with eyes that missed nothing. I've been looking for you. The auction is about to. She stopped, noticing Jack and Penny. I wasn't aware you'd brought personal guests. Grandmother, this is Jack Sullivan and his daughter Penny. Jack works at Montgomery Industries. Penny is in the STEM program I've been funding. The grandmother, the legendary Eleanor Montgomery, Jack realized, studied them with sharp interest. Sullivan, you're the janitor. Yes, ma'am. The one whose daughter interrupted a board meeting. Penny shifted nervously. I'm sorry if I caused trouble. Eleanor's stern expression cracked slightly. On the contrary, child, you accomplished what I've been trying to do for years, made those fossils think about something other than their portfolios. She looked at Catherine. Your father would be apoplectic. Yes, Catherine agreed quietly. He would. Good. Eleanor's smile was sharp as a blade. He was a brilliant man, but he forgot that companies are made of people, not numbers. Don't make his mistakes, Catherine. She swept away, leaving them in stunned silence. Did your grandmother just, Jack started, approve of you? I think so. Catherine looked as surprised as he felt. She hasn't approved of anything I've done since I took over. The auction began with various luxury items going for astronomical prices. Penny watched with wide eyes as people bid more than Jack's annual salary on watches and wine. Why do they spend so much? She whispered. It's for charity, Catherine explained. The money goes to help sick children. Oh, that's nice then, even if it seems silly to pay that much for a necklace. When a weekend at a tech camp came up for auction, Penny gasped. That's the camp Dr. Chen told me about, the one where you get to build real robots. Catherine caught Jack's eye, a question in her gaze. He shook his head slightly. The bidding started at $5,000, an impossible sum. But Penny wasn't focused on the price. She was watching a little boy at another table, his face falling as the bids climbed higher and higher. He wore leg braces and sat in a specialized wheelchair. He really wants it, Penny observed. Look how sad he is. The boy's parents leaned down, clearly explaining why they couldn't bid. His shoulders slumped in defeat. Penny tugged on Catherine's dress. Can you buy it for him? Penny, Jack warned. That's not, please. Penny looked between them. He wants to build robots just like me, but his legs don't work right, so maybe robots are extra special to him. Catherine studied Penny for a long moment. Then, without a word, she raised her paddle. The bidding war that followed was fierce. Richard himself seemed determined to win, smirking at Catherine each time he raised. But Catherine was relentless, finally securing the camp spot for $15,000. Lot sold to Ms. Montgomery, the auctioneer announced. Catherine immediately rose and walked to the boys' table. Jack couldn't hear the conversation, but he saw the child's face transform with joy. His parents' shocked gratitude. Catherine's gentle smile as she knelt by the wheelchair. That was nice of her, Penny said matter-of-factly. Now he can build robots, too. When Catherine returned, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. His name is Timothy. He wants to design prosthetics that work better than his current braces. So you gave him a chance, Penny said. Just like you gave me a chance with the STEM program. How did you know, Catherine asked, about the sponsorship? Penny smiled. I'm 6, not stupid. Plus you got the same look when you watched me in class that you had watching Timothy. What look? The one that says you're remembering being a kid who wanted something really badly. Catherine stared at Penny, then laughed, a real unguarded sound that drew stares from nearby tables. You're terrifying, you know that. Daddy says I'm perceptive. That's like being a detective, but for feelings. The evening continued with dinner and dancing. Jack found himself relaxing, especially when Penny charmed everyone at their table with her questions and observations. Even the initially snobbish tablemates seemed won over by her genuine curiosity about their lives and work. As the band played, Penny yawned widely. Daddy, I'm tired. We should go, Jack said to Catherine. It's way past her bedtime. Wait, Catherine said. One dance. She turned to Penny. Would you mind if I borrowed your father? Penny's eyes lit up. Only if you dance good. Daddy's feet shouldn't be stepped on. Catherine laughed. I'll do my best. On the dance floor, Catherine placed one hand on Jack's shoulder, the other in his. They swayed to the music, and Jack was acutely aware of how different this was from their usual interactions. Thank you, Catherine said softly, for coming tonight, for bringing Penny, for everything. You paid $15,000 for a stranger's child, Jack pointed out. I think you're the one who deserves thanks. Penny asked me to. How could I say no to her? Most people manage it fine. That camp spot could have funded a lot of other things. Catherine was quiet for a moment. When I was Timothy's age, all I wanted was to attend a computer camp. My mother promised we'd find a way, but then she died. My father said camps were frivolous. I never got to go. So you made sure Timothy could. Penny made sure. I just provided the funds. She looked over at where Penny had curled up in a chair fighting sleep. She has such a pure heart. How do you protect that in a world like this? You don't protect it, Jack said. You nurture it. You let her see the hard parts, but also show her how to respond with kindness like you did tonight. I'm not kind, Catherine protested. I'm selfish and cold and... You're human, Jack interrupted. Complicated and flawed and trying. That's all any of us can be. The song ended, but Catherine didn't pull away immediately. Jack, I need to tell you something. The board is planning another vote. Richard's family is backing a hostile takeover. When next month, maybe sooner. She finally stepped back. I wanted you to know in case things change. Your job is safe. I've made sure of that, but I might not be around the office much longer. Catherine, I should get you both home. Henry's waiting outside. The ride home was quiet. Penny slept against Jack's shoulder while Catherine stared out at the city lights. As they pulled up to Jack's building, Catherine helped carry a drowsy Penny inside. Pretty dress, Penny mumbled, as Catherine tucked a blanket around her in the car. Pretty but hard, too. Don't let the mean people take it away. Catherine's composure cracked. She pressed a kiss to Penny's forehead, then fled to the elevator before Jack could see her tears. But he'd seen them just as he'd seen the woman behind the CEO facade all evening, generous, vulnerable, trying so hard to do right in a world that rewarded wrong. As he carried Penny up to their apartment, she stirred. Daddy, is Miss Catherine going to be okay? I don't know, sweetheart. We have to help her. Sometimes grown-up problems are too big for... No, Penny interrupted with surprising firmness. Love is never too small. Ms. Wilson taught us that even tiny spiders can make big webs. Jack tucked his daughter into bed, marveling at her wisdom. Maybe she was right. Maybe love, in the form of friendship, of chosen family, of simple human connection, could stand against corporate greed and hostile takeovers. His phone buzzed. A text from Catherine. Thank you for making tonight bearable. Tell Penny she was the belle of the ball. And Jack, I'm glad you came. Kay, he smiled, typing back. Penny says to remember that even tiny spiders can make big webs. We're here if you need us. 3 dots appeared, showing she was typing. They disappeared, reappeared, disappeared again. Finally, I'm beginning to believe that. Good night, Jack. As he prepared for bed, Jack thought about the evening, the glittering gala, the cruel whispers, the unexpected kindnesses. Catherine Montgomery was fighting for more than just her company. She was fighting for her soul, for the right to be more than her father's daughter. And somehow a janitor and his 6-year-old daughter had become her allies in that fight. It shouldn't make sense, but as Penny would say, the best things rarely did. The call came at 3:00 a.m. on a Tuesday, exactly 1 month after the gala. Jack fumbled for his phone, heart racing at the late hour. Catherine's name illuminated the screen. Jack, her voice was barely a whisper. I'm sorry to call so late. I'm at the office. Would you bring Penny? What's wrong? Everything. Her voice cracked. The board met an emergency session. They've given me until morning to resign voluntarily or face a public removal. I need to see friends. Real friends. Jack was already getting dressed. We'll be there in 30 minutes. Penny remarkably didn't complain when he woke her. She seemed to sense the urgency, quickly pulling on clothes and grabbing her backpack of books. Is Miss Catherine in trouble? She asked in the taxi. Yes, baby. Big trouble. Penny nodded solemnly. Then we help. That's what family does. The word family hung between them, unexamined but true. They found Catherine in her office, still in the clothes she'd worn to the board meeting. Papers were scattered everywhere, financial records, employee testimonials, 5 years of her life's work spread across every surface. You came, she said as if surprised. Of course we came. Penny marched over to hug her. You're sad and scared. Nobody should be found and scared alone. Catherine held Penny tightly, her professional armor completely gone. They won. Richard's family convinced enough shareholders. Said I'm too young, too emotional, too focused on people instead of profits. Focusing on people is good, Penny insisted. That's why everybody likes you better than the mean board people. Everybody doesn't have voting shares, Catherine said bitterly. Jack surveyed the chaos. What are you looking for? I don't know, something, anything. Catherine gestured helplessly. My father left documents, private ones. I've been going through them, trying to understand why he built the company this way. She trailed off. Can we help? Penny asked. Catherine smiled sadly. I don't think so, sweetheart, but thank you for wait. Penny had wandered to a shelf of old books, her head tilted. This one's different. She pointed to a leather journal, identical to dozens of others on the shelf. It smells older. And look, the dust pattern's wrong. Catherine pulled the journal down and a sealed envelope fell out. Her name was written across it in her father's handwriting. With shaking hands, she opened it. My dearest Catherine, she read aloud. If you're reading this, then I've failed you as I failed your mother. By the time you find this, I'll likely be gone and you'll be fighting battles I created, but never had the courage to fight myself. Catherine sank into a chair. Jack took Penny's hand, but she pulled free, moving to stand beside Catherine. Keep reading, Penny encouraged softly. Catherine continued, her voice growing stronger. I built this company on ambition and greed, thinking success would fill the hole your mother's death left behind. It didn't. It only made me colder, harder, less like the man she loved. The board members I chose reflect the worst of what I became. But you, my daughter, have your mother's heart. I see it every time you fight for others, every time you choose compassion over profit. I was too proud and too afraid to say it while alive, but I say it now. You are the CEO this company needs. Not because of your name, but because of your heart. Tears streamed down Catherine's face as she read the next part. In the safe behind your mother's portrait, you'll find documents that will help. Voting shares I kept hidden, meant for you when you were ready to fight for what's right. The board doesn't know they exist. Use them wisely. Use them to build the company your mother would have wanted. And Catherine, forgive me. I love you. I've always loved you. I just forgot how to show it, Dad. The office fell silent except for Catherine's quiet sobs. He loved you, Penny said simply. He just got lost, but he left you a map to find your way. Catherine looked at Jack over Penny's head. The portrait's at the family estate. I haven't been there since he died. Then we go there, Jack said decisively. It's 4:00 in the morning, and you have until morning to save your company. We go now. The drive to the Montgomery estate on Long Island took an hour. Penny slept in the back seat while Catherine stared out the window clutching her father's letter. I hated him, she whispered, for choosing the company over me, for dying before we could reconcile, for making me fight so hard for everything. But he saw you, Jack offered. In the end, he saw who you really are. Too little too late, maybe, or maybe just in time. The estate was a massive Georgian-style mansion, dark and imposing in the pre-dawn light. Catherine led them through rooms covered in dust sheets to a study where her mother's portrait hung a beautiful woman with Catherine's eyes and a gentle smile. I haven't looked at her in years, Catherine admitted. It hurt too much. She's pretty, Penny said sleepily. She has kind eyes like you. Catherine's hands trembled as she revealed the safe behind the portrait. Inside were stacks of documents and on top another letter. This one in her mother's handwriting. My darling girl. Catherine read, her voice breaking. Your father promised to give this to you on your 18th birthday, but I know my husband. He'll lock it away with his emotions and forget that love matters more than legacy. So I write this hoping that someday when you need it most, you'll find these words. She had to stop, overwhelmed. Penny took her hand, and Jack placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. You are not your father's daughter, Catherine continued. You are mine. You have my heart, my compassion, my strength. Don't let the world tell you these are weaknesses. They are your greatest powers. Build something beautiful, my love. Build it for the people, not the profits. Build it so that every employee feels valued, every child has opportunities, every family thrives. Build the world we dreamed of when you were small and anything seemed possible. I love you forever, my brightest star. Mom. She knew, Catherine whispered. She knew I'd need this. She knew I'd be here fighting this fight. Mothers always know, Penny said sagely, even when they're in heaven. Catherine pulled out the share certificates, enough to give her controlling interest when combined with her existing holdings. Her father had been secretly buying them back for years, keeping them from the board's knowledge. This changes everything, she breathed. Then her phone rang. Richard, she said, looking at the caller ID, probably calling to gloat. Answer it, Jack suggested, but put him on speaker. Richard's smooth voice filled the room. I hope you've come to your senses. The board meeting is at 8:00. Resign gracefully and we'll ensure you keep your dignity. And if I don't, then we'll destroy you publicly. The media already has the story. Emotional female CEO tanks company with bleeding heart policies. Your father's legacy will be forever tainted by your failure. Penny suddenly grabbed the phone. Mr. Mean Man, this is Penny. You're being a bully, and bullies always lose in the end. Miss Catherine is going to win because she has love, and we have proof, and you're just mad because nobody likes you. She handed the phone back to a stunned Catherine. What proof? Richard's voice had lost some of its smugness. Catherine found her steel. The kind that comes with voting shares you didn't know existed. See you at 8:00, Richard. Oh, and Penny's right. You really are a mean man. She hung up, then burst into slightly hysterical laughter. Did that just happen? Penny Sullivan, corporate negotiator, Jack said proudly. I don't like bullies, Penny said simply, and he was being mean to our friend. Our friend, the words settled around them like a warm blanket. The sun was rising as they drove back to the city. Catherine had called her lawyer who was preparing the share documentation. The morning board meeting that was supposed to be her execution would become her coronation. I couldn't have done this without you, Catherine said, glancing at Jack in the passenger seat. Without both of you. You could have, Jack contradicted gently. You're stronger than you know, but I'm glad we were here anyway. They reached Montgomery Industries as employees were arriving for the day. Word had somehow spread, maybe Richard's premature gloating, and a small crowd had gathered in the lobby. "Ms. Montgomery," someone called out. "Is it true? Are they forcing you out?" Catherine stood straighter. "They're trying, but I'm not going anywhere." A cheer went up from the crowd. These were her people, the ones who'd benefited from her policies, who'd seen their lives improve under her leadership. "We support you," a woman holding a baby called out. "The daycare changed our lives." "The mental health program saved my marriage," a man added. More voices joined in sharing stories of how Catherine's Worker Dignity initiative had helped them. Penny tugged on Jack's sleeve. "Look, Daddy, she's crying, but good crying." Catherine was indeed crying as she heard how her policies had mattered. Jack watched her absorb the support, watched her spine straighten, and her chin lift. "Thank you," she called out. "All of you. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a board meeting to attend." The crowd parted as she strode toward the elevator, Jack and Penny beside her. In the privacy of the car, she looked at them both. "I want you with me," she said. "Both of you? Is that okay?" "We're not board members," Jack pointed out. "No, you're family. My chosen family, and I want them to see who I'm fighting for." The boardroom was already full when they arrived. Richard's smug expression faltered when he saw Catherine's stride and confidence restored. "This is highly irregular," Thomas Reynolds blustered. "These people have no business." "These people," Catherine interrupted, "are why I do business. Jack is Sullivan, who works on nights to support his daughter alone, who deserves dignity and respect and a living wage. Penny Sullivan, brilliant and kind, who deserves every opportunity to reach her potential. They represent thousands of employees and their families who make this company run." She pulled out the share certificates. "But if you need a more traditional reason for them to be here, I'm appointing Jack to the board as a representative of employee interests. My controlling shares allow me to do that." "Those aren't real," Richard said desperately. "You're bluffing." Catherine's lawyer entered with a team of clerks, all authenticated and verified. "Mr. Hargrove, Ms. Montgomery owns 51% of voting shares as of this morning." The boardroom erupted in chaos. Richard's face went from red to white to red again. The older woman from the gala, one of the few who'd shown Catherine kindness, actually smiled. "Well played, Catherine," she said. "Your mother would be proud." "Yes," Catherine said softly. "I think she would." The vote, when it came, was a formality. Catherine retained her position as CEO with expanded powers to implement her vision. Several board members resigned on the spot, including Richard, who stormed out muttering about lawyers. When the room cleared, only Catherine, Jack, and Penny remained. Penny had been quietly drawing during the entire meeting, and now she presented her picture to Catherine. It showed three figures standing together, surrounded by a web that connected them to many other, smaller figures. "It's beautiful," Catherine said, her voice thick with emotion. "It's us," Penny explained, "and all the people we help. See, the web connects everyone. That's how you make things strong. Lots of connections, not just money." Catherine pulled Penny into a hug, then held out her hand to Jack. He took it, completing their little circle. "I have a confession," Catherine said. "That first night when I found you and Penny in my office, I wasn't there by accident. I'd been watching the security feeds. I was so lonely, and I saw you talking to her while you worked. Saw how much you loved her. And I wanted to know what that felt like, to have someone who loved you just for being you." "You have that now," Penny said simply. "We love you, Miss Catherine." "Right, Daddy?" Jack met Catherine's eyes. So much had changed since that night. The Iron Lady had melted, revealing a woman of warmth and strength and vulnerability. Somewhere between board meetings and butterfly gardens, between galas and late-night conversations, she'd become essential to their lives. "Right," he agreed softly. "We do." Catherine's smile could have lit the entire building. "I love you too. Both of you. You saved me." "No," Penny corrected. "We saved each other. That's what family does." In the weeks that followed, Catherine implemented sweeping changes at Montgomery Industries. The Worker Dignity Initiative was expanded, not eliminated. A new innovation department was created to develop technologies that improved employee well-being and productivity simultaneously. And most surprisingly to the corporate world, she appointed Jack Sullivan, formerly the night janitor, as Director of Workplace Integration, a position that utilized his engineering background while giving voice to frontline workers. The gossip mill churned furiously. Stories circulated about the janitor who'd saved the company's servers, the little girl who'd charmed the Ice Queen CEO who'd found her heart. Catherine ignored the rumors, focused instead on building the company her mother had envisioned. Jack threw himself into his new role with unexpected passion. Years of watching from the margins had given him unique insight into what employees truly needed. His technical expertise combined with his experience as a worker made him invaluable as Catherine restructured the company. And Penny thrived in her role as unofficial company mascot. Employees smiled when she visited, sharing stories of how their lives had improved under the new policies. She became the human face of Catherine's vision, a reminder of why their work mattered. 3 months after the boardroom showdown, Catherine invited Jack and Penny to dinner at her penthouse apartment. The space was exactly as Jack had imagined. It's sleek, modern, impeccably designed, and utterly impersonal. No family photos, no mementos, nothing that reflected Catherine herself. "It feels like a hotel," Penny whispered to Jack as Catherine prepared drinks in the kitchen. "I know," Catherine said, overhearing. "I've never really lived here. Just slept and showered. My father bought it when I took over the company. Said it projected the right image." "Where did you live before?" Penny asked, exploring the space with undisguised curiosity. "A small apartment near Columbia. I was happier there." Over dinner, Catherine seemed uncharacteristically nervous, rearranging her food more than eating it. Finally, she set down her fork. "I have a proposition," she said. "I've been looking at brownstones in Brooklyn. There's one with 3 floors. I'd take the top floor and the lower 2 floors could be, well, they'd be perfect for a family of 2, if you were interested." Jack froze. "Catherine, are you asking us to move in with you?" "Not exactly, more like move into the same building. Separate spaces, but close." She rushed on before Jack could respond. "The commute would be better for both of us. Penny would have a garden. There's a good school nearby, and I've discovered I like having people I care about within reach." "Like a real family," Penny said, eyes bright with excitement. "But with privacy." "Exactly." Catherine smiled gratefully at Penny. "What do you think, Jack?" Jack considered the proposition. Their current apartment was cramped, and the neighborhood wasn't ideal. The practical benefits were obvious, but the implications stretched far beyond logistics. This would intertwine their lives even further, creating a family in all but name. "Could I see it first?" he asked finally. The brownstone was everything Catherine had described and more, a historic building, lovingly restored with high ceilings, large windows, and the promised garden in back. The lower 2 floors formed a spacious duplex that made their current apartment look like a shoebox. The 3rd floor was a self-contained unit with its own entrance, though an interior staircase connected all 3 floors. "This is too generous," Jack said as Penny explored the garden. "It's not charity, Toti." Catherine anticipated his objection. "It's an investment in my happiness. These past months with you and Penny, in my life, I've never felt less alone. People will talk. People already talk. I don't care anymore." Jack watched Penny through the window, imagining her growing up in this space with a garden for experiments and a real home instead of their cramped apartment. "The owner wants an answer by tomorrow," Catherine said, mistaking his silence for hesitation. "If it's too much too soon, I understand completely." "We'll take it," Jack decided, "but I'm paying rent, a fair market rate." "Jack, non-negotiable. I need to contribute." Catherine understood. This wasn't about money but dignity. "Fine, but I get to babysit Penny whenever I want." "Deal." Moving day arrived with unexpected emotions. As Jack packed up their small apartment, memories of Laura seemed to rise from every corner. This had been their first home after her death, the place where he'd rebuilt their life from shattered pieces. "Mama would like the new house," Penny said, sensing his melancholy as she carefully packed her books. "She always wanted a garden." "She did," Jack agreed, throat tight. "She wanted to grow tomatoes." "Then we'll grow tomatoes," Penny decided, "and we'll tell Miss Catherine they're special because they're Mama's tomatoes." The brownstone transformed with their presence. Jack's practical furniture and Laura's colorful art warmed the pristine spaces. Penny's books and science projects spread throughout the duplex, creating pockets of creative chaos. And upstairs, Catherine's apartment slowly evolved from a showcase into a home as she adopted their more relaxed approach to living. The staircase connecting the units began as a formal boundary, used only with explicit invitation. But as weeks passed, the boundary softened. Catherine came down for morning coffee. Penny went up to show Catherine her latest projects. Jack found himself climbing those stairs in the evening to share a glass of wine and conversation after Penny was asleep. 6 months after the boardroom confrontation, the headline in the New York Times read, "Montgomery Industries posts record profits while leading employee satisfaction." The article featured a photo of Catherine at a company picnic laughing as Penny showed her a spiderweb in the garden. Life fell into a comfortable rhythm. Jack's department became a model for other companies seeking to improve workplace conditions while maintaining profitability. Catherine's reputation evolved from ice queen to visionary leader, her worker dignity initiative studied in business schools. And Penny blossomed her natural gifts, nurtured by the best education Catherine could provide, and more importantly, by the love of two parental figures who adored her. Sunday dinners became sacrosanct, the one time each week when all three were guaranteed to be together regardless of work demands or social obligations. They took turns cooking, though Catherine's early attempts were hilariously inept. How can someone who runs a multi-billion-dollar corporation not know how to boil pasta? Jack teased after a particularly disastrous meal. Different skill sets, Catherine defended herself laughing. I can read a financial statement in 6 languages, but apparently measuring water is beyond me. That's why you need us, Penny declared. Daddy knows cooking and fixing things, I know science and feelings, and you know business and dressing fancy. Together we know everything important. It was during one such dinner that Thomas Reynolds reappeared in their lives. Catherine's phone rang with news that Reynolds had joined forces with Richard's family, acquiring enough shares to mount another challenge. They're calling for an extraordinary general meeting, Catherine's lawyer explained. They found a regulatory technicality regarding your father's hidden shares. It's not strong, but it could tie things up in court for months. Catherine ended the call, her expression troubled. They never give up, do they? Bullies don't stop until someone stands up to them, Penny said with 6-year-old wisdom. And sometimes you have to stand up more than once. Well, I'm not backing down. Catherine's jaw set with determination. We've proven that compassionate business is profitable business. Our numbers speak for themselves. We'll fight this to Darshin, Jack promised. All of us. The following week brought unexpected news. Catherine was offered a position heading an International Business Ethics Commission, a prestigious role that would take her to London for at least a year. The timing coinciding with Reynolds' renewed attacks seemed suspicious. It's a setup, Jack concluded after reviewing the offer. They're trying to lure you away so they can dismantle everything while you're gone. Probably, Catherine agreed, but it's still an extraordinary opportunity. The commission's work could influence business practices globally. So you're considering it? Jack's stomach nodded at the thought of Catherine an ocean away. I have to. It's everything I've been working toward, the chance to create real change beyond just one company. The possibility of Catherine leaving cast a shadow over the brownstone. Though nothing was said explicitly, tension crept into their interactions. Jack found himself pulling back, protecting himself against the pain of another loss. Catherine grew quieter, spending more time at the office. Only Penny seemed unchanged, treating each day as if their family unit would continue indefinitely. As Catherine's decision deadline approached, Jack suggested a return to the Butterfly Conservatory where they'd first begun to form their unlikely bond. For old time's sake, he explained when Catherine questioned the timing. Penny's been asking to go back. The conservatory was just as magical as their first visit. Butterflies danced through humid air, while exotic plants created a lush backdrop. Penny raced ahead, eager to see if her favorite species were still in residence, leaving Jack and Catherine momentarily alone. I've decided to turn down London, Catherine said without preamble. I belong here. Relief flooded through Jack, followed immediately by guilt. You can't make that decision based on us. I'm not entirely. Catherine watched Penny coax a butterfly onto her finger. What good is changing the world if I lose the people who make it worth changing? You could have both. We'd wait for you. Would you? Catherine turned to face him fully. Would you really wait a year, maybe more, while I'm on another continent? Or would you protect yourself by pulling away, assuming I'd never really come back? Jack couldn't deny it. He'd already begun the process creating emotional distance as a defense mechanism. I've spent my life chasing professional success, Catherine continued. I've won awards, broken glass ceilings, transformed a company. But none of it mean anything compared to Sunday dinners and morning coffee and hearing Penny laugh. I've found my home, Jack. I'm not leaving it. Before Jack could respond, Penny returned, excitement bubbling over. Daddy, Miss Catherine, come see the blue morphos, remember me. They followed her to a quiet corner of the conservatory where iridescent blue butterflies clustered on a feeding station. One landed on Penny's outstretched hand, wings pulsing slowly. See, they trust me because I'm gentle, Penny whispered, then looked up with sudden intensity. Miss Catherine, are you going to be part of our family forever? The question hung in the air, giving voice to what the adults had circled around for months. Catherine knelt beside Penny, her eyes shining with unexpected tears. Is that what you want, Penny? Yes, Penny stated simply. You belong with us. Daddy's happier when you're around. He smiles more. And I like having two people who love me instead of just one. Plus, you need us too. Everybody needs a family. Catherine looked up at Jack, a question in her eyes. He realized with sudden clarity that they'd been building toward this moment since that first night when Catherine had discovered them in her office, two broken people finding healing in each other, brought together by a child wise beyond her years. Penny's right, Jack said softly. You belong with us, if that's what you want. It's all I want, Catherine replied, rising to her feet. My mother's letter said to build something beautiful. I thought she meant the company, but she meant this, a family, a home, a life filled with love, instead of just achievement. Jack took her hand, finally acknowledging what had been growing between them for months. Then stay. Be part of our family officially. Are you proposing Jack Sullivan? Catherine's voice held wonder and amusement. I think I am, though I didn't plan to do it in front of butterflies with a 6-year-old matchmaker. I think it's perfect. Catherine smiled through tears. And my answer is yes. Penny looked between them, satisfaction written across her face. See, I told you she needed to be part of our family forever. The wedding was small, held in the brownstones garden, where Laura's tomatoes now grew alongside flowers Catherine had planted. Eleanor Montgomery sat in the front row, dabbing at her eyes and declaring to anyone who'd listen, about time, that child has more sense than the entire board combined. As they exchanged vows, Catherine's voice broke only once when she promised to love and cherish not just Jack, but Penny too, to be the mother her heart had already claimed her to be. I was lost, she said, looking between them, trapped in a tower of my own making. But you both showed me that love doesn't make you weak. It makes you invincible. You are my heart, my home, my everything. Jack's vows were simpler, but no less heartfelt. You gave us hope when we had none. You showed us that families come in all forms, that love multiplies when shared. Penny and I were complete before you, but with you, we're whole. And I, Penny piped up, making everyone laugh, promise to keep teaching both of you about spiders and feelings and important stuff like that. As they walked back down the aisle as a family, butterflies from the conservatory were released, dancing around them in the autumn sunshine. Jack thought about that first night, how a desperate decision to bring his daughter to work had led to this moment. Daddy, Penny whispered, we did it. We saved the princess from the tower. Actually, Catherine said, overhearing, I think the princess saved herself. She just needed a little help from her friends. Even better, Penny decided. That's a much better story. And it was a story of loss and hope, of bridges built across impossible divides, of a little girl whose wisdom saw through corporate armor to the heart beneath. A story of how love like spider silk could be invisible and still be the strongest force in the world. The headlines would write themselves, CEO finds love with former janitor, or from maintenance to management, a corporate fairy tale. But the real story was simpler and more complex than any headline could capture. It was the story of 3 people who chose each other, who built a family from scratch, who proved that sometimes the best things come from the most unexpected places. Thomas Reynolds and Richard eventually dropped their challenge when faced with overwhelming shareholder support for Catherine's leadership. The Worker Dignity Initiative became Montgomery Industries' signature program, studied and emulated by companies worldwide. Jack's department pioneered new approaches to workplace design that balanced technological efficiency with human well-being. And Penny, now officially Penny Sullivan Montgomery, continued to bring people together with her unique blend of scientific curiosity and emotional intelligence. Her school science project on human connection patterns, modeled after spiderweb engineering, won first place, earning her an invitation to a national competition. One evening, as summer faded into autumn, Jack found Catherine and Penny in the garden, heads bent together over a real spiderweb glistening with dew. Catherine was taking notes while Penny explained something with animated gestures. "What's the project this time?" Jack asked, joining them. "We're studying how the spider repairs damaged sections," Penny explained. "See how it connects new threads to the strong parts that survived." "That's smart engineering. It's also a perfect metaphor for resilient organizations," Catherine added. "And families." Jack watched his wife and daughter, words that still amazed him daily as they returned to their observations. Catherine had transformed from the isolated CEO into this woman who could spend an hour studying a spiderweb with genuine fascination. Penny had blossomed with the security of two parents who adored her, her natural gifts flourishing under their combined guidance. And Jack himself had changed, most of all, rediscovering the man he'd been before grief had narrowed his world, finding new purpose in work that mattered, new joy in a love he'd never expected. "Daddy," Penny called, breaking his reverie. "Come see, the spider is building a new section. It's connecting everything together, making it even stronger than before." As he knelt beside them in the garden, Jack thought about connections, how the three of them had woven their separate strands into something new, something resilient, something beautiful. Not perfect, but strong enough to withstand whatever storms might come. "You know what Charlotte says in the book?" Penny asked, watching the spider work. "We're born, we live a little way deep. By helping you, perhaps I was trying to lift up my life a trifle." "That's a good way to live," Jack said, meeting Catherine's eyes over Penny's head. "Lifting each other up, making each other's lives better." "That's what families do," Penny said with certainty. "And companies too, if they're smart, like Miss Catherine's." Catherine smiled, reaching for Jack's hand across their daughter's shoulders. "I think that's what my mother meant in her letter. Building something beautiful isn't about architecture or corporate structure. It's about creating connections that lift people up, whether it's three people in a brownstone or thousands in a company." Later that night, after Penny was asleep, Jack and Catherine sat on the brownstone's roof terrace, watching the lights of Manhattan glitter across the river. Their hands intertwined, comfortable in the silence that can only exist between people who truly know each other. "Do you ever miss it?" Jack asked finally. "The penthouse, the power lunches, being the Montgomery Ice Queen." Catherine laughed softly. "Not for a second. Do you ever miss being invisible, the anonymous janitor no one noticed?" "Never," Jack replied honestly, "though sometimes I miss the simplicity. Life was less complicated with just a mop and a bucket." "But smaller too," Catherine pointed out, "for both of us." Jack nodded, acknowledging the truth in her words. They'd each given up a kind of safety, she the isolation of corporate success, he the anonymity of humble work. In exchange, they'd gained something infinitely more valuable, a family built on choice rather than circumstance, on seeing each other's true selves and choosing to love anyway. "Penny asked me something interesting today," Catherine said after a moment. "She wanted to know if love was like gravity, a force that pulls people together without them even trying." "What did you tell her?" "I said I thought it was more like spider silk, invisible unless the light hits it just right. Seemingly fragile, but strong enough to hold what matters. And most importantly," Catherine turned to face him, "it has to be deliberately spun strand by strand, choice by choice, day after day." Jack leaned forward, pressing his forehead against hers. "Smart answer. Maybe you should write a book, Everything I Need to Know About Love I Learned from Spiders." Co-authored by Penny Sullivan Montgomery, age 6 3/4. Catherine laughed. Below them, the city continued its endless rhythm. Somewhere in that skyline stood Montgomery Industries, transformed under Catherine's leadership into a company that valued people as much as profits. Somewhere, children were benefiting from scholarships Catherine had established. Families were thriving because of policies Jack had helped implement. But here on this rooftop was the true legacy. They were building a family that had found each other against all odds, three strands woven into something stronger than any could be alone. "Thank you," Jack said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing past the janitor's uniform, for loving Penny, for building this life with us." Catherine's answer was in her kiss, in the tears of joy on her cheeks, in the way she held him like he was her entire world, which as it turned out he was. Along with Penny, they had become the center around which Catherine's universe now turned. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Another board meeting, Penny's science competition, the endless work of balancing family and careers. But tonight under the stars with the woman he loved beside him and their daughter sleeping safely below Jack Sullivan was exactly where he belonged. Life had a funny way of putting you exactly where you needed to be, even if that place was a luxury office building at 200 a.m. with a mop in one hand and hope in the other.